What is modal jazz and how did it change music? Imagine a style of jazz that gives musicians more room to breathe and express themselves. That's what modal jazz is all about. It changed the way jazz sounded and played in a big way. Modal jazz is a type of jazz that focuses on musical modes, which are specific scales, instead of complex chord progressions. Traditional jazz often moves quickly through many chords, making improvisation more about navigating changes. Modal jazz simplifies this by sticking to one mode or scale for a longer time. This creates a more open, spacious sound that invites musicians to explore melodies and rhythms more freely. It started in the late 1950s and became popular in the early 1960s. Artists like Miles Davis and John Coltrane wanted to break away from the fast-paced, chord-heavy styles like bebop and hard bop. They looked for a new way to improvise that was less about following strict chord changes and more about expressing feelings through melody. They used modes such as Dorian, Mixolydian, and Lydian to build their music. One of the most famous albums that introduced modal jazz is Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, released in 1959. This record showed how solos could stretch out over long, static harmonies. Soloists could use entire 7-note scales instead of being limited to a few notes within a chord. This approach made improvisation more about mood and melody than about hitting specific notes at specific times. Modal jazz also drew inspiration from non-Western music, like Indian ragas and African rhythms. This added new textures and rhythmic patterns to jazz. The rhythm section in modal jazz often played in a more interactive way, making the music feel more flexible and less predictable. The impact of modal jazz was huge. It opened up new paths for jazz composers and performers. It influenced later styles like free jazz and experimental jazz. It also encouraged musicians in other genres to experiment with different scales and modes, broadening the musical vocabulary. In the end, modal jazz changed music by shifting focus from fast-changing chords to the power of scales and modes. It allowed for longer, more expressive solos and created a sound that was more meditative and spacious. This shift marked a new chapter in jazz history, inspiring many musicians to push the boundaries of what jazz could be.